Welcome to the Due Diligence Podcast, where we explore how leaders make and execute their biggest decisions, from transactions to founding organizations to career pivots and beyond. This podcast is produced by Sleeping Giant Capital. We connect executive talent and capital to invest in West Michigan businesses. To learn more, visit us at sleepinggiantcapital.com or stop by our office in downtown Kalamazoo.
Hey guys, Doug, Derek, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. I'm the manufacturing millennial.
Okay, hold on. What is a manufacturing millennial? Because those two words don't go together. So let's start there. Jay.
Well, they don't. So the manufacturing millennial is a brand that I kind of created with the idea back in like fall of 2019. So I was attending a conference, AHTD. It was a conference for high-tech distributors in the manufacturing and automation space. And in that conference, they were talking about future-proofing your business. And I thought, well, how do we future-proof businesses when the future generations don't want to work in manufacturing, right? We want to grow, but no one's going to work. So I thought, it's really interesting. We're at a conference of 400 business leaders, yet none of those business leaders are bringing the youth, the 20s and 30-year-olds into the industry and these conferences to experience what that is. So the idea of the manufacturing millennial came where I'm an outspoken, very energetic, very passionate millennial in the industry. And my goal is to advocate how we could do a better job bringing Gen Zs and millennials into manufacturing and making them more aware of all the opportunities that exist, from engineering to skilled trades to being in sales and business. There's so many different roles and opportunities in manufacturing, but really, how do we dispel the myth that manufacturing is just this dark, dull, dirty, dangerous, dumb industry that, you know, the general media and just society classifies it as, and say, no, it's a lot more. There's a lot of robotics and technology and automation and digitalization and impact through social media. So yeah, the brand is to drive advocacy on the amazing opportunities that manufacturing has to offer.
So this is where we kind of intersect, right? Because it's not only work for, but it's also now owned.
Yeah.
Right. Our firm, Sleeping Giant Capital, was created because we're at this part where all these manufacturers are owned by, you talk generations, so we'll call it the boomers, but an old generation that wants to retire. So now you got a succession problem, but you also have an employment problem because, we talk to our students at universities and none of them can seem to get excited about going to work for a small or mid-sized manufacturer, although the opportunities are endless and it's amazing, but they're not driven or even pointed or educated to even think about that. So I mean, through a podcast as educators, what would you suggest like education needs to do for like higher ed or all of that?
Well,
it's a massive problem to solve.
Let's look at some numbers right now. So when we go back to beginning of 2020, we saw a dramatically increased rise with retirement of the workforce within manufacturing. Where on average, we were having somewhere around 300 to 400,000 people leaving the industry every month. And this could either be through retirement or this could be through people just exiting manufacturing and not coming back.
Is that globally or US?
This is US. This is all US data. Okay. So right now within US manufacturing, I'd have to check what January's or December's Labor Bureau data was. But right now within manufacturing, we have somewhere between 700 to 850,000 jobs that are unfulfilled within manufacturing right now in the United States. 700 to 850,000 jobs. By 2030, according to studies from Deloitte, from McKinsey & Company, from Tallow, like 4 or 5 different independent research companies, they're expecting that unfulfilled job number in manufacturing is going to be somewhere between 2 to 2.3 million unfulfilled jobs in manufacturing. So when you look at the data from 2020 and that we had from a 3% unfulfilled job rate in manufacturing to a 7% unfulfilled job rate in manufacturing, we lost $92 billion of economic opportunity output, right? This was data that was in the pipeline within manufacturing that simply we couldn't process and fulfill because the labor wasn't there. Now imagine you take that number and you multiply it by 3, by 4, we're going to have, almost a $500 billion lost of economic opportunity lost because of unfulfilled jobs in manufacturing. So how do we fulfill these jobs? Well, there's a couple of things that are going to be happening. One is as automation becomes more prevalent in manufacturing, the demand for jobs in manufacturing will be less. Like right now, we're capped at about 12.9 million jobs in manufacturing. It's the most since coming out of the 2008 recession. It's not like the numbers that were in the 80s and 90s, but we're about 13 million, which represents a $2.5 trillion economic impact. What we're going to be seeing over the next 10 to 15 years is there will be a decreasing amount of people working in manufacturing. However, the jobs and the tasks of those of those opportunities will be higher education, higher level. So as robotics and automated equipment becomes more prevalent, instead of a unskilled frontline worker that's demanded in manufacturing, it's going to be a 2-year associate degree robot technician that's going to be in demand. So to answer your question, Derek, of how do we prepare for this, we need to first understand not where the current job market is, but where the job market's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, because we need to start preparing our workforce now on when they graduate, what's going to be in demand then versus what's going to be in demand now. So where do we start? A few different ways and a few different avenues. There's the traditional 4-year engineering degree, educational route, right? Go get a bachelor's degree, go get a master's degree and whatever, and enter that workforce, become a mechanical, become electrical, become a controls or industrial engineer. Great. Those are phenomenal opportunities that you're going to find success in and continue demand for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Awesome. Engineering is a phenomenal route. Most STEM careers are. But what we're finding though is that with a lot of general 4-year degrees, 76% of degrees that are come from a bachelor's degree are not even used once they're graduating. So almost 3/4 of the degrees that people are getting from college are not even used for their profession. And a lot of that is because so many people were told to go to college with no real goals in mind on what they should be doing when they graduate. So all of a sudden, my generation of millennials, the next generation of young Gen Zs are graduating. Right now, the average federal debt from a student loan is $38,577. So we're graduating with $40,000 in student debt with a degree that has no value, that doesn't even apply to the job that we have. So we need to do a better job educating the future workforce that, hey, if you don't want to know what you want to go into when you graduate, a 4-year degree might not be for you, but you should look at other opportunities like skilled trades or vocational schools, right? And so what we need to be doing a better job is educating the future workforce on the opportunities that exist within manufacturing, but also educating the parents, because the parents, yeah.
Can I jump in there? So what is it that then the higher education institutions should be teaching if what's the role that they go into? Are they going in as a robot technician? Are they managing people who are, where does the higher ed start in this piece? I understand the trade element of that.
Yeah. I mean, so there's the great debate of the value of higher ed in a lot of cases. For me personally, engineering and STEM degrees are phenomenal in a lot of cases. Yet there's so many degrees that exist now that, in my opinion, have almost zero value to current demand workforce. In the case where the joke is, a business degree is the same thing as getting a GED. Everyone has them. You go through 4 years of memorization of paperwork and business practices, yet you graduate probably with not even doing an internship. So you have all of this data collection of books, but no real world experience. So like, I guess the whole idea with
you can't do anything.
Yeah. It's like you have a GED, you have a business degree or a communications degree. Yes, there are the unique cases that they're valued, but I would argue the people who are being successful with those degrees have experience beyond the books. That's what's driving them through success. And so when I look at the higher education piece as a whole, like the 4-year degree, I think, and this is going on a tangent with the whole academic system as a whole, like the fact that universities have zero fiscal responsibility that they're getting paid from the federal government or through private student loans. They could care less once you have a degree, once you graduate, because they have their money like instantly. So, I mean, I would look at from a risk standpoint as a whole, and this is not necessarily within manufacturing, like we need to put pressure back on the universities to make the degrees that they're putting out actually valuable. And the way to do that is they take fiscal responsibility.
So design me a degree. What is the degree that you would design for someone who's 22 who could go into a West Michigan manufacturing business?
Okay.
What does that degree look like?
So for manufacturing, we'll say automation, robotics, manufacturing specifically. What would a degree? Well, I would pretty much replicate what we're doing here at Grand Valley, where it's a combination of a 4-year degree that has multiple elective opportunities that you can select. But more importantly, Grand Valley has a required 3-semester co-op, which starting your summer of your sophomore year, and then every other semester after that, you're doing a full year co-op with a manufacturing company to get real world experience before you graduate. So when you're going to college, you're getting 4 years of education, but on top of that, you're getting a full year of manufacturing work experience when you're doing that. So when you're designing a degree, that's where you do it. The other thing, if I'm doing degrees for manufacturing, specifically in West Michigan, I would concentrate less on theory and more on practical needs and implementation, right? A lot of people will go to a U of M or these higher schools, to push into a master's or even a doctorate, eventually in engineering. But for real world experience, if you want to go get 4 years, we need to stop talking less about theory and talk more about real world applications and installations. For example, the amount of engineering degrees that don't give most students the opportunity to either program with CAD or program with a PLC is extremely minimal. Yet those are some of the highest demanded jobs right now, is being a robot technician, a PLC programmer, or a CAD designer, or something with a SCADA or MES software engineer. So designing that degree, Doug, would be give me like, go and talk to your local manufacturer and saying, where's our skill force lacking? None of them are going to say we need a person who can give us better, theoretics on machine design dynamics. It's tell us about giving them experience when, solving and troubleshooting robotics or programming systems, or taking a industrial design concept and pushing it through to the design stage, to the BOM, revision stage, to then the assembly, and then run off production. Like that's what we're seeing. Like that's what Grand Valley's, going back to my alma mater, going back to Grand Valley, their senior project is working with a manufacturing or a company, and they get a full senior design project that is a real world application. So it could be a CNC tending machine. It could be a polisher. It could be some test piece of equipment that's doing a pressure or air loss measurement. They're not huge machines, but they're $150,000 to $200,000 machines that a group of 5 senior engineers are responsible. Like that's real world experience. And the crazy part is Grand Valley has like a 99% hire rate before they even graduate, because they're creating engineers who are in demand as a result of that educational practice.
How about we switch to the operator side of the equation, in the next generation of all these jobs, because you discussed the number of people who are leaving, and some of that is retirement, and there's a massive number of baby boomers who are retiring who operate these West Michigan businesses.
Yeah.
And I mean, Derek, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, but usually these operators are really talented mutant creatures.
Mm-hmm.
They've got engineering experience. They've got strong finance and accounting. They know how to sell. They've got really good people skills. I mean, they really are impressively broad.
Yeah.
What do you see as the need there for operators to have in terms of skills for this next generation of owner operators in West Michigan?
Yeah. I mean, so the big thing, like I put a statistic, and this was a Twitter post of mine. The 300,000 people retiring from manufacturing isn't what's scary. It's the 12 million years of experience and tribal knowledge that's leaving annually is what's terrifying. So when you have it's not the fact that it's a 1-to-1 ratio of we have a baby boomer that's leaving and then a younger generation retiring, and we can't have that 1-to-1. It's the fact is companies at a majority scale have done a horrible job documenting processes within their manufacturing that can be captured and transferred on to the next person. And so that's one of the things that's we're always pushing, and I'm talking about, is how do we leverage digital solutions, like digital work instructions, better analytics and tracking within machine OEE and productivity, and just general predictive and preventative maintenance practices. The one thing about a frontline worker today is they're not just doing one task in most cases. They're very flexible. Their responsibilities are more than just putting parts. Even a maintenance guy, the responsibilities aren't just, hey, I'm handling mechanical maintenance on these boilers and furnaces and HVAC within a manufacturing facility. The guy's also a PLC tech, right? If a machine goes down, he's got to log into, a Rockwell PLC or a Siemens PLC, diagnose it, getting up and running again, find out why it faulted, and keep it running. So these frontline workers, in a lot of cases, and the blue collar people who keep manufacturing running, their skills is what needs to be tracked and done a better job, keeping and retaining to pass on to the next generation. And I think the best solution for that is adopting technology. Technology has improved so much. It's become so cost effective where I can wear a VR headset. A person can track the maintenance that they're doing. The video can be interpreted through AI, and digital work instructions can be written out by just watching a person do a process. Like, that is the technology that's available these days.
Wow. So you're saying that if someone goes and does something, you can basically, through technology now, just spit out a set of instructions and almost a video for somebody else to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So you could wear like a HoloLens headset plugged into check out why am I completely drawing a blank now? Out of Boston, PTC. PTC has a ton of arranged solutions through augmented reality and workforce training and technology. They have a ton of different branches, but within there, you could wear a VR headset, record the process in which a skilled worker is doing. Then that is video captured, and then you can play back that recording through wearing a headset to see what the operator is seeing and follow those exact steps. And those steps then can be translated through AI to then actually be created in work instructions. Is it perfect yet? No. Is it way more impressive than what you thought was feasible? Absolutely. And it's one of those things that we don't even realize the capability of that technology that's there. It's just a lot of times so many companies are afraid of change and afraid of adopting because they immediately think virtual reality headsets, AI, way too intimidating. Yet you get a young millennial or Gen Z on board, and all of a sudden they're like, man, that sounds really awesome. I used to have a VR, headset that I played, Saber Sword on or something like that. And they're immediately ready to step in and do that because technology to millennials and Gen Zs is nowhere near intimidating as, for Gen Xers and baby boomers.
So, okay, so that's a really interesting concept. So, but let's poke a little bit at the underlying theory of what is potentially a myth. Because you're the first question you answered, you had with a whole bunch of data, the amount of data you're carrying around in your head is pretty impressive, Jake. So one thing I think we got to peel back the onion on a little bit is someone that would say automation, manufacturing jobs have been shrinking forever. There's less jobs. Manufacturing is shrinking in the US. It's getting outsourced, or it's getting either automation or outsourced overseas. And then you have a stat that there's 12.9, I think you said 12.9 million jobs.
Yeah, 12.9 million workers in manufacturing in the US right now.
Yeah. So, and I think I'm correct in saying the output of manufacturing in the US has actually been growing this whole time, right? Like as a percentage of GDP or whatever, it's been growing the entire time. It hasn't been shrinking. So as someone that would say like, hey, you're wrong, these jobs are going away, they're shrinking. There's, how do you counterpunch your theory with that person?
Yeah, I mean, so as a percentage of US GDP, manufacturing is shrinking. I think manufacturing represents 8.5% of total US GDP. However, US manufacturing is still a $2.5 trillion industry on its own. If you were to take US manufacturing and make it its own country, it would be the 7th largest country in the world in terms of manufacturing output. US manufacturing, like economy, would be greater than the rest of the remaining countries in the world. It would be 7th. So I mean, when we hear about manufacturing jobs leaving, yes, China has a larger manufacturing US GDP than the United States done. That transition happened a few years ago. However, U.S. manufacturing in terms of non-based, low-quality commodity products is still happening in the U.S. Like, we are still making the best quality, high-end, engineered manufacturing goods that are out there. And we will be doing that. When I hear jobs are leaving America, I haven't seen that happening in a while. In fact, reshoring is something that's is actually really happening. Reshoring, nearshoring, where during the pandemic at one point in time, we'll just give this an example. During the pandemic, 2020 to 2021, it cost around $2,000 for a shipping crate to come over from China to here to the United States before the pandemic. During the fulfillment, or when the pandemic was happening, that number reached about $10,000 per cargo container. So we had a 5 times X on just shipping costs coming from overseas. Here's the other statistic. Back in the 1995, 1985, the labor differential between labor cost in the United States compared to labor cost in China used to be 30X, right? It was 30 times cheaper for labor in China than the US. Today, it's about 3.2%. So we saw it was 30 times cheaper China years ago. Today, it's 3 times cheaper. The cost differential that we're seeing within manufacturing just doesn't make sense for a lot of manufacturers to manufacture overseas anymore, especially since labor is getting more expensive. Even China is adopting automation at a higher rate than we are in the United States right now. China integrated more industrial robots than Japan, South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and the United States combined last year. Right? China did more robots than the rest of those countries combined. So when you look at the strategy long-term of this global manufacturing, automation is going to rule the roost. And at the end of the day, then it doesn't matter where you automate, right? If robots are making parts and robots are running manufacturing, why not just make the robots local? And make that manufacturing local. So we're seeing a lot more companies that are I care about local supply chain and local products being manufactured than trying to get one that's a little bit cheaper overseas, because it's not the same as it was 20 years ago. The other thing that we're seeing just in general regions is we're going to see a ton of manufacturing coming back to Americas, heavily in Mexico too. And so while we might not experience the amount of reshoring that we're getting here in the United States, Mexico is going to be a phenomenal partner to the United States when it comes to nearshoring and getting products, manufactured here on the continent.
So the reshoring is, I think, critical, right? We had all the supply chain issues during the pandemic, and now you got the whole Red Sea thing during the time of recording this podcast. That seems to be a mess, and the supply chains issues are going to continue. Do you think this, and so you take automation and reshoring together, so now it's just as cheap to do it here because there's a lot more automation. Go out 3 to 5 years. Is manufacturing going to, in your prediction, going to grow from here? Like, 12.9 is a low end of the estimated jobs. It might go to 15, 20 because everyone's going to want a localized plant here to not worry about the supply chain, or you think we're stable here and we're going to stay right around this number?
Yeah, I don't see us breaking 13.5 million unless something crazy happens. Really the shift I see in jobs is there's going to be higher paid, higher value, higher skilled jobs are coming to manufacturing. Like, we're going to see the transition out of low entry jobs in demand to, I don't need just hands. I need hands that can program a robot. I need hands that are knowledgeable on machining or CNCing. And I think that's the shift that we're going to be having, just because automation's coming simpler now. I mean, look at the rise of collaborative robots, right? I can take a collaborative robot and I can do a basic machine tending through a CNC or a basic palletizing on an iPad, and I can do end-of-line palletizing with literally having zero experience. I took my daughter to Universal Robots last year. She was 5 at the time. She programmed a robot pick and place routine in about 5 minutes. And that's the whole thing. Technology is simplifying the learning curve to adopting automation. So no longer do you need to have a high-level skilled engineer to automate your processes. technology is so simple these days. Automation is so simple these days, where a small to medium sized business, and Derek, I'm going to throw another just stat at you. 98.6% of manufacturing businesses in the United States classify as a small to medium sized business. 98.6% of businesses. So,
how is small defined in that case?
50 small is under 50, medium is under 250, 300, I think. There's way, but in general whole, I mean, you can argue that. I think another is like 78% of businesses classify as a small business. So there you go. I mean, so you can see the scale of the majority of manufacturers employ under 50 people in the United States. The thing that I look at with that is, let's just use an example of, we're going to make up a machine shop. I'm drinking Prime, so we're going to call it Prime Machine Tending CNCs. We have Mr. Raspberry, who has been the shop owner for the last 35 years, who has hired a bunch of his friends who have an aging workforce, and the average age of them is 55 years old. Well, they want to stay in business, but they have a hard time finding a bunch of CNC guys that can redo those jobs. So what does Mr. Raspberry do? Well, he goes out there and buys a universal machine tending robot that now an operator doesn't have to stand by a machine, take a metal part, load it into the machine, the CNC machine, do its post-processing, and then unload it. They can set up a jig to do that instead. So now all of a sudden, I can do lights out manufacturing, where now my talented worker is able to stay there. They're still able to make parts and compete against, another company that's overseas that's trying to make those parts. Now all of a sudden, automation is saving Prime manufacturing, because they can be competitive, still make the same parts with a workforce that might not have the same skills and knowledge in the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so there's the twist that I talked about earlier. With the earlier question was maybe not growth in jobs, right? So the 12.9 million might change, but if you take automation and you hold that 12.9 million, theoretically the 2.5 trillion, the output should go way through the roof.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because all of these American manufacturers will become more competitive, or as competitive, or a better option than, shipping a container through the Red Sea, having missile attacks or whatever. But it should become much more productive, and then push out a lot more and be much more price competitive. Given automation, that 2.5 trillion should go to 3.54 or something. Is that the trend that we should be looking at?
That would be incredible. I mean, going from 2.5 to 4 trillion would be like amazing. But yeah, the idea would be, when we adapt more automation, adopt robotics, adopt technology with the existing and shrinking, more likely workforce that we're going to have, we're going to be able to continue to grow our total economic productivity, and GDP continue to grow up. So like last year, we went up from 2.4 to 2.5 trillion dollars. Well, going up $100 billion in manufacturing is pretty impressive. And the goal would be, as the total global, economy and manufacturing begins to become more stable, and cheap labor might not exist the way it was. We're going to see what happens in Africa in the next, 10 to 20 years. But as a whole, the idea would be, by a decreasing workforce, manufacturing's productivity and total economic output will be able to stay the same. And like, that's the main goal that we're seeing. But in order to do that, the way we work, the jobs that we do, are going to have to change.
So, okay, now let's talk about Mr. Raspberry.
Yeah.
Right? Mr. Raspberry himself. So you got the employees, and he goes and hires a bunch of employees.
Yeah.
And a lot of the manufacturers we see, Mr. Raspberry is older than all those employees he's trying to replace. Right?
Yeah.
He's the one that started, he's the oldest, he hired everybody. Those tend to be younger than. So what is the American solution, or the millennial manufacturer? What should be their perspective on Mr. Raspberry? Because like, what's going to be the solution with all of these retiring owners? Because that's a whole different problem. You can't automate the owner with a robot. So how do we solve that issue, knowing that you're a worker, you walk in, you meet Mr. Raspberry. As a millennial, Mr. Raspberry's in his 70s now, and you can't connect with, there's a big, generational gap connection thing you got to do there. So that's problem number one with the millennial taking that job. but how do we go further into solving the problem with all the manufacturers? 98%
Mhm.
are under 50 employees. What happens to all those companies?
Well, I mean, you need to have a risk mitigation plan is what you need to do. Like you need to figure out how you start reducing risk from an aging and turning over workforce. And there's so many different sides to a business that I don't even think people realize, from an operationals, from a manufacturing, from a supply chain, from a sales. I mean, there's there's a million different avenues and ways we could have this discussion. And every one of them is a correct discussion to have. I think really what needs to happen from general manufacturing is manufacturers need to embrace technology and not fear technology. Like, we as an industry are so afraid of change because for decades, the way we did it worked. And so as the saying goes, why change something that works? Well, it's going to be the point where it doesn't exist. Like you have a working CNC machine, but eventually you have a working operator, but one day that operator just won't be there. So it's one of those things is as Mr. Raspberry, what he needs to do is he needs to start figuring out, how can I run a business without relying on the existing workforce, the existing practices that I currently have.
So I think you're missing the point here. The problem is Mr. Raspberry wants to retire.
Okay.
Right. So so you take supply chain risk. We talk about that as, let me give you an example. We talk about supply chain risk as the Red Sea, this and that. Mm-hmm. And let me say, you're in Michigan, right? So you take GM or Ford or Stryker or some of the big companies, and they have all of their supply chain, even if it's in Michigan and throughout. The bigger supply chain risk I see is the Mr. Raspberries are 71. They're not thinking about, oh, I got to automate that. They're thinking about, how do I retire? Mm-hmm. How do I get out of this mess? And the supply chain risk to GM and Ford would be, oh my God, my whole supply chain is going away.
Yeah.
Because there's no millennial to take over that company.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, one, to work in manufacturing, but who's going to own these? Because Mr. Raspberry is older than the workforce.
Yeah.
And Mr. Raspberry is not going to. So either he's gonna pass away in the chair, mm-hmm. or he's got to do something.
Yeah.
Either way, that's not a good situation for that entire supply chain. So when we say I'm talking about owner.
Yeah.
Talk about the owner risk, because those owners are older than all of those employees. So yeah. How do you use them? Like, we solve that issue. Because
I'm gonna add to that. Yeah. Cause it's like, and I'm going to spend all this money on more robots and more machines and more technology for a cost saving that's going to happen when, like, it's all this new stuff. Why do it?
No, yeah. And then you tell your millennial, hey, go work for this, Mr. Raspberry. And he goes to meet Mr. Raspberry in the interview. Mr. Raspberry's 73. And millennial's like, yeah, I'm going to take a job here. This seems safe. So talk about that one.
Yeah.
How do we approach that? That's the problem that we look at. So how are you approaching that problem?
Well,
or have you not even thought about that yet?
Well, no, yeah. I mean, so let's do the numbers. What is it? 27 to 30% of businesses are passed on to the next generation of manufacturing. Is that you guys would know that more than me? Isn't that close to that number?
I don't know that number.
Okay.
I don't know how close that number, but
I know.
So let me give you a stat. In the next 10 years, something like $4 trillion of business worth of business value has to turn over.
Yeah.
So double your manufacturing output has to turn in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah. Where do you start?
Yeah. You're convincing these people to go work for Mr. Raspberry, but Mr. Raspberry has to turn in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And Mr. Raspberry is not going to buy automation because he's trying to think on his way out.
Yeah. He's trying to get that EBITDA and that company value up as high as you can.
Correct.
Okay. So I guess what's the way to do it? I don't have those numbers. Here's what I'm seeing. I guess I could talk about what I'm seeing happening. Is that fair?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I'd love to know what you're seeing, because
Okay. So let's just give an example of one. My background is in automation distribution. I did that for 7 years. The amount of family-owned distribution companies that have been acquired over the last 4 years is mind-boggling. Like I remember attending AHTD, which was which was the first association that I was a part of, and there was probably 40 or 50 different automation distributors that were a part of that organization, maybe more. I don't know the exact numbers. However, in the past like 5 years, I would say at least 25 of these companies have been acquired by a larger distributor, an industry that wants to get a pipe and wire distribution company that wants to get into automation and technology. So another distributor who's not in the industry who wants to buy their way into the industry, or a capital venture group that's going out there and it's a bunch of guys that are saying, I want to go and create a massive opportunity. Like Applied Technologies is one, and they went up and they bought in like a 5-year period of time, like 7 distributors across the US who are all selling similar product lines. Now it's a nationwide distributor. And they're doing that for a couple of reasons. One is brand value, right? If this distributor now master distributor now sells Siemens in 38 of the 50 states, they have a lot of negotiating power with those accounts back to Siemens, for example. That's one thing I'm seeing a ton of company acquisition from businesses that are between $5 to $20 million in sales every year that are being acquired and just swallowed up and made into larger companies that way. The other trend that I'm seeing is a lot of cases. I have seen a lot of 30 and 40-year-olds right now going in and buying out companies in a lot of cases. And it's a group of 4 or 5 guys that are coming in. They might be backed by a venture company that's not invested day to day, but there's the trend is a lot of companies right now are paying a lot of money for manufacturing companies just to get it, because they understand there's going to be a shift in value to these companies. Because as soon as these companies adopt automation, they're seeing like in a 1 to 2 year time, like a 23 to 37%. I'd have to get that number. It was from McKinsey and Company. But when companies adopted automation, they saw like a 23 to high 30% increase in productivity and output, like in like a 24-month period of time. But what we're seeing though is, acquisitions of like distribution and small of these companies from 5 to 20 million are just getting really bought up by a lot of VC companies and groups in a lot of areas that those are buying happen. Have I seen a lot of just businesses shut down yet? No, I haven't yet. But really a lot of, okay, here's another example. I see a lot of companies, larger manufacturing companies, just buying up their supply chain, right? For example, look what look what SpaceX did. So there was a parachute company that was making parachutes for all of the capsules for SpaceX. They were going under. They couldn't do that. Instead of SpaceX going out and finding another distributor, they just bought them up and absorbed them. So I think what you're seeing as well is for a lot of these companies that they're supplying to, when it's going under, you just see these large companies just simply just buying up the entire organization and just building that into their own system. So I guess those are kind of the examples that I can give. I mean, as far as how do we help a 70-year-old? Man, I wish they would have done that 5 or 10 years ago, because they're really clicking on time. And a lot of times you're bringing in a lot of times, honestly, private companies to help through that phase. And like, that's just what's happening right now is a lot of, I literally sat next to a guy in the plane in Orlando a couple of weeks ago that, is doing the exact same thing. They go in and they're finding these companies, and, it's one of those things where, it needs to happen, because the 70-year-old doesn't know how to transition and get the most money, to get the most value for his bank. But at the same time, it's something that has to happen, or he'll be at the point where he's so far gone, the value of his company, he's just going to have to sell when he could be selling up here. He's going to have to sell down here because he waited too long.
maybe we wrap up with you know, a little discussion. Are you based now in West Michigan, or are you someplace else?
Yeah, I'm in Grand Rapids.
You're
Yeah.
still in Grand Rapids, and you know, born and raised, went to Grand Valley, right? So, and you worked in West Michigan manufacturing.
Yeah.
So tell me, but you're now a national, more national presence. You're out and about at you know, all these conferences and meeting people. So what makes West Michigan manufacturing different?
Two things. The culture of people here makes West Michigan incredible. It's one of those things, like trying to sell in West Michigan versus trying to sell in Detroit is a whole nother world. Relationships, I would still say, is the fundamental business practice here in West Michigan. It's creating relationships has more value than the product that you're selling, versus you go over to Detroit and it's very much a what are you making? How cheap can you get it to me? When can you get it to me? West Michigan is very still much a relationship, helping each other out mentality. And I think that's just the culture of West Michigan. You know, there's a bunch of memes and jokes like we literally wave to everyone as we're driving by to our neighbors. Yeah, that's us. The other thing that makes West Michigan so special is a couple things. One is we have, I think, the third highest robot density per capita in the United States in West Michigan. Like, yeah, there's a number for you. No one knows it, but here we go in Grand Rapids. We have one of the highest installation and integration deployments of robots here in West Michigan. It's a hidden gem. But the other thing as well is the diversity of manufacturing and products that are made here that exists. When the economic downturn happened in 2008, 2009, I was attending college at the time, but I had a rough idea of what was going on. We did not feel the economic impact that was happening in Michigan near as much as what was happening in Detroit, because we were diversified between, you know, all the automotive, all the tier 2, all the tier 3, all the furniture, all the med, all the food that's here. We have a pretty diverse, while it's still heavy automotive, we have a pretty diverse industry here. And I think that really protects us long term. And just makes this industry so successful. And I mean, and that's why you have so many great companies that are starting up over here. But also as well, I would argue the amount of talent that is created through educational programs here is huge. Like West Michigan has the highest density of FIRST robotics teams in the United States here as well. So if you think of, there are more FIRST robotics teams here in West Michigan than anywhere else. Those are all future engineers. Those are all people in skilled trades that are going into that industry, which is going to curate, which is going to create more, which is going to allow people to create more businesses. I mean, you look at where my first job was JR Automation. Now they were sold to Hitachi for like 1.3, 1.4 billion. But coming out of that JR group at one point in time was just a flow of now 5, 10, 15, 20 other custom automation machine builders that are also making automation solutions and OEM stuff. So I mean, it's a waterfall of new opportunities, new businesses, new growth, new education coming into the workforce, new high value skilled education that's coming into the workforce, I think is the other really big thing as well. By the end of the day, I think culture is really what makes West Michigan just so special in that aspect. And we're also Beer City, USA. So
and we're on the best coast. We're on the best coast, right? No salt water, no sharks, no smell, just clean water. Yeah.
And everyone has a cottage that they all go up to the summertime and they invite all their friends to. I mean, so it's like it's our own play area. Besides when like we get an inch of ice and then everything's closed down and then my flights are delayed like 3 hours. Like Grand Rapids is great, but man, in the wintertime, it's a nightmare flying out of here.
Yeah.
For like a week. We get maybe 5 days of really bad weather. The rest of it's fine.
That's true. I'm just complaining. I want it to be like springtime again.
Yes,
school's canceled for a couple days, snow days.
Exactly.
I mean, nothing.
This is great conversation. Great to meet you, Jake. You know, as folks who are invested and investing in West Michigan manufacturing businesses, you're a wealth of knowledge. And great getting your perspective. Would love to wrap up with 3 quick rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Oh, I got a 4th one that we're gonna ask.
Okay, let's do it.
So leave me for last, just in case you want to edit it out.
What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite finance term, Jake? Or Let's start there. But do you have a favorite finance term?
Favorite
Just the sound of it that you like.
EBITDA.
EBITDA.
EBITDA. I would say just because that really opened my mind up onto how P&L and businesses run is EBITDA.
Yeah. Our previous guest, Jim Volk, shout out to Jim Volk, accountant over here in Kalamazoo. EBITDA was, before you really know what it is. Do you have a favorite restaurant or gem kind of off the hidden path here in West Michigan you would recommend? Restaurant, bar, watering hole?
There's a truck stop diner called the 76th Street Diner, right on 76th Street, and it's a great little diner. Is the food top notch? No, but honestly, if you want to go get a really good fry and Reuben on a cold day, you can't go wrong.
Okay, I like that. We always like finding these. We're out meeting with companies. It's always good. You got to find the good diner spots.
76th Street Diner. Yeah.
And then my last one, I'll kick it over to Derek. Is what do you wish you've learned in college that you didn't?
I wish I knew more on taxes. Like I wish from creating LLCs to moving into a sole proprietor to understanding how to do payroll to understanding how to qualify business expenses and stuff. Like I felt like if I knew more knowledge on that on now would be huge. Your question was, what do I wish I would have known in college now?
Yeah, would you have learned in college? Yeah.
I wish I would have learned about Bitcoin.
Good or bad?
Because if I would have invested, so I had Bitcoin and I bought a pizza for like a quarter Bitcoin one time.
There we go. Derek, final question.
All right, final question. And I'm gonna rip it off some of our previous final questions.
Yeah.
You got a dangerous adventure you got to go on. You got to solve a hard problem, and like you're going into a jungle, a battle, war, a crazy business problem, impossible to solve, and you got to pick someone to go with you. Do you take Ben or Rick?
Oh, geez. Well, does the place include small and really narrow places that they have to squeeze into?
Nobody knows who Ben and Rick are, but
it's
okay. Everyone will Google them.
Am I going into the Shire? Because if I'm going to the Shire, I'd have to bring Rick because I need someone to look like the hobbits.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one. Honestly, both those guys are absolutely incredible. And if I would take either one of those guys to go out and solve some problems.
All right, good. That's a good one. All right, I hope that was a good addition.
But if it involves small places, I would take Rick.
Gotcha.
Love you, Rick. I know
it's like I don't
Rick
know.
loves you too. Rick loves you.
I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, the movie SWAT, right?
Yeah.
They got to go into the plane.
Yeah.
And they're like, none of us can fit in. And they turn to the lady that's on the team, and then she hops in there. Yeah.
That would be Rick.
That's who Rick is. Yeah. All right. That's a good description of Rick. I'll give it that to him. All right.
Excellent.
All right, Doug. Sorry, I hijacked
that's great.
rapid fire.
That's great. No, that's all I had. Jake Hall, the manufacturing millennial. Thanks for coming on Due Diligence.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.